Good morning. This is Senator Black, retired senator. I'm going to talk with you today about this question of whether the West is going to lose Africa and indeed a lot of the world over the issue of sodomy, LGBT rights, and so forth. Let me start off. There was a New York Times article, and this was from May the 15th. And the title of it was, "Putin is selling victory and many Russians are buying it." Now, his message, according to the Washington Times, was taking hold within Russia, that Russia was fighting against the whole Western world and winning, and cited to his stunning election victory, which had an enormous turnout, and the new offensive against Kharkiv in Ukraine, which took the Ukrainian army off guard and managed to sweep a significant distance towards the second largest city in Ukraine, which is Kharkiv. And then they mentioned also the prosperous economy in Ukraine. We were promised by the Biden administration that once these sanctions were unleashed, they would simply grind the Russian economy into dust. The ruble would become worthless. Turns out that very shortly the ruble was the strongest currency in the currency markets, and Forbes now ranks the number of billionaires in Moscow just behind those in New York City. So it has been interesting. But where I wanted to go with all this is that hold on just a second here. I've got Hector Herrera saying that there is no sound on. Jose, are you able to hear?
You're fine, Senator.
Okay, fine. So there may be some problem, Hector, with your sound, but in any event, so on top of this, and sort of behind it all, is that the Russians are really delighted that that President Putin has aggressively promoted traditional family values, and he is leading a crackdown on sodomy, pedophilia, transgenderism, and the entire LGBT movement. He has just recently celebrated the Day of the Family, where they are awarding medals to the mothers of 10 or more children, and they're promoting fertility. They've turned extremely hostile towards abortion, and they're extremely pro-family. They're very pro-religion, particularly pro-Christian, which is the dominant religion of Russia. But in any event, Russia has now outlawed homosexual publication. So you cannot publish a book, you cannot publish a magazine that promotes homosexuality. So there's a very clean new atmosphere that has taken hold within Russia over the last 20 years or so, and that certainly is in contrast to what's going on in the United States, where you have President Biden giving a speech endorsing child killing in the form of abortion, where he literally makes the sign of the cross. So he is using blasphemy in promoting this practice of killing children. Now, I want to bring together the importance of what is going on in terms of global affairs. Here's something that was announced just a couple of days ago. And it turns out that, and there's the website called Juicy Ecumenism, which reports on religious matters. And their title read that 1 million United Methodists had exited the denomination in a single day. Now, we have reported earlier on this phenomenon. The Methodist Church, which I believe is the second largest Protestant denomination after the Southern Baptists, it is literally exploding. It's like, what is this? Sometimes there's this Death Star phenomenon in the universe where a star just suddenly explodes and disintegrates. And this is happening. You know, there were many fine Methodist churches in former generations, and now you have this divorce taking place within the denomination between those who believe in the teachings of Jesus Christ and Holy Scripture, and those who want to adopt a new culture where sodomy and homosexuality will become elevated. And so this is causing tremendous stress, and it is dissolving this enormously important denomination with a suddenness that it's unprecedented. I don't think there's any situation where this has ever happened so rapidly in American history. But what's happening is 1 million United Methodists left the denomination in a single day. And this happened when the way that the Methodist Church works, it has a large body of people in the United States and a large body on the continent of Africa. And what happened is in the Ivory Coast, they waited until there had been one of these general meetings of the people who make policy for the Methodist Church, and the outcome of that was that that now the Methodist Church would allow homosexual behavior, homosexual priest, or not priest, but clergy. They would allow adultery and extramarital sex, and these would not be reasons for removing a pastor. So the pastor could cat around and he could hang out in the bars and pick up ladies. He could bring them to church, presumably, and be having an affair with somebody who's sitting in the front row, all dialed up, ready to go out that night. He could be involved in open, notorious homosexual behavior, and that would not be a chargeable offense for the clergy, as I understand it. And in any event, the Africans, who make up actually a large portion of the United Methodist, more than half, in Africa, they're overwhelmingly conservative, and they are very displeased with what the United Methodist Church is doing. Now, the Methodist Church in America has, they've been reporting about 5.5 million members, but since 2022, 7,700 churches have left the Methodist Church. It's a vast, 7,700 churches have left in just a couple of years, and they've taken with them 1.5 million church members. So this has shrunk the U.S. church down below 4 million, probably about 3.9 million members. And so the Africans vastly outnumber now the number of Americans in the Methodist Church. But Ivory Coast, by leaving, is now going to encourage a great number of others to leave. And it's believed that over the next 5 years, nearly all of Africa will purge itself of the Methodist Church, and leaving nothing but the rump church of perhaps several million U.S. members. And the way that churches that adopt homosexuality work is that they very quickly drop down on an extremely steep decline. And so we've seen this before, and so I think you'll hardly hear of the Methodist Church within a few years. Quite an amazing thing that's happened. Okay, now let me shift a little bit more into what's going on in Africa, and how our embrace of sodomy, sexual perversion, transgenderism, with the whole child grooming, pedophilia in the schools business, how this is all playing out in Africa. Now, just within the last day or so, the French Soccer League, LFP, suspended Mohamed Camara of Morocco for putting a piece of white tape over a logo on his jersey that said anti-homophobic. And in announcing his suspension for 4 games, the league said effectively that Mohammed had refused to raise everyone's attention to the problem of homophobia, and basically he had refused to promote homosexuality and sodomy. That was what was unforgivable for the French Soccer League. I'm going to tell you, in Africa, in much of the world, places in Asia, Russia certainly, people don't get it. They don't understand that in the West we claim that people enjoy freedom of speech, and then we punish people not only when they, for saying things that the elites dislike, but now they're punishing people who don't say the things that they want said. And in this case here, you have Muhammad. I presume that he is Muslim, and Christianity and Muslim and Islam both are fundamentally opposed to sodomy, to LGBTQI, all of these different alphabet. They are against the practice of homosexual sodomy, and it's very close intertwining with pedophilia directed particularly at little boys. And so they look and they say, well, wait a minute, you're saying that you have freedom of speech and that's one of your values, and here you are punishing this French soccer player because he won't endorse sodomy, which is in violent opposition to his faith. And so it's making the West look silly. Now, what kind of impact is it having on France? Well, the French President Macron, the ever mercurial president of France, has finally agreed that he will give in to Nigeria's demand that France and all of its troops, all of its horses and all of its men withdraw from Niger. They don't want them there. And France has been there ostensibly to fight against ISIS and Al-Qaeda and all of this. But anybody who's followed this long enough understands that in the West, we promote terrorism in order to go in and fight terrorism. You look at what the United States has done in Syria, where we have armed, equipped, and provided diplomatic support to Al-Qaeda, the same group that brought down the Twin Towers and crashed into the Pentagon just 10 years earlier. We have supported them unwaveringly. Al-Qaeda in Syria, we've supported unwaveringly since 2011. And so we create a terror organization in order to attack the terror organization and save the people from terror. This is going on with the French. I have no doubt that France makes sure that the terrorists have their arms and supplies, and then the French soldiers go out and they fight them. It's quite an interesting game. But in any event, Macron was very defiant for a couple of months. The people of Niger threw out the old government, which was corrupt, which did not really pay much attention to the citizens of Niger. And Macron was defiant, and he's, we got the troops there, we're not leaving. And finally, the people just became so hostile towards the French that they were forced to withdraw. And Politico reported that Mr. Macron blinked first. And so France is going to withdraw its 1,500 soldiers by the end of the year. And their ambassador, who has been under effective house arrest in the Nigerian capital, will finally be released, along with half a dozen French diplomats, and they will flee back to France as part of the deal. And so here's what we see now. Now, if you look at what's happening to France, France has always had this shadow colonial empire from the time that they closed down the formal colonies. They have really been the central bankers for their former colonies, which gives them enormous influence over them. And but it's not just in Niger that they're being kicked out. And they were thrown out of Burkina Faso and Mali. And so now they have lost 3 of their former colonies. And it's a very big deal for the French, because they've got 6,700 soldiers deployed over there. And they still have them in a couple of other places that they have not evacuated. But what's happening is that there's such enormous anti-French sentiment among all of the people of Africa that it looks like their time in Africa is coming to a close. This is important because in the Sahel of Africa, French troops are engaged in combat. Even though it's low intensity, it's still it still exercises their army. Once they are pushed out of Africa, they will not have an operational army anywhere. They'll still have an army, but it won't be gaining experience. Its people won't actually be under fire anywhere. And there is a feeling on the French side that this military presence in the Sahel was one of the last symbols of France's hard power, and that their withdrawal undermines the country's self-perception as a great world power. So this is happening. Now, this dovetails with the fact that Niger has demanded that the United States withdraw its forces. And under enormous pressure, we have finally agreed that by September the 15th, at the latest, we will withdraw our military forces of about 1,500 soldiers from Niger. I don't believe that these withdrawals would have been successfully pushed by the African nations were it not for the fact that our embassies in Africa fly the rainbow flag frequently, and it's just sort of a sharp stick in the eye to the African people that their culture is looked upon with such disdain that we're willing to actually fly the rainbow sodomy flag in their countries in defiance of their religion and their culture. And I think it's so we're being pushed out, and a large part of the reason is that we're no longer viewed as a beacon of moral strength, of positive values, of freedom. We're now looked upon as a rather perverse, rather decadent culture. And they can point to these things. This is what happened in Afghanistan. We flew the rainbow sodomy flag from our embassy there. We set up universities in Kabul, that American universities, where they taught gay studies or whatever. And we did it in utter defiance of their culture. So people were surprised that the regime there collapsed just within weeks after we left. The whole thing was hollow. We did not use diplomacy or common sense. We were just totally arrogant in what we did. Okay, so so what is happening with the culture in Africa? There is a tremendous surge now of legislation to clamp down on homosexual behavior. And this is according to Amnesty International. And across Africa, there are widespread protests against people who engage in child molestation and various perverse sexual activities. The nation of Ghana passed a bill which identifies people, anyone who openly claims to be a member of the LGBTQI plus group. It's illegal. It's a crime to declare yourself to be a member of that category, and the crime is punishable by up to 3 years in prison. You can get 5 years for promoting homosexual activities in Ghana. In Uganda, they just passed one of the harshest anti-gay laws that includes the death penalty for aggravated homosexuality. Now, most Western media reports did not describe what aggravated homosexuality was, but it includes grown men anally raping little boys, and ripping and damaging their internal organs by doing it. This is unfortunately, it's a widespread practice across the world. It is part of what goes on. So I guess the message that I would pass on to you today is that, excuse me a moment here. The message that I would pass on to you today is that that the culture of America has a very corrosive impact on our global standing across the world. During the years that I served with Department of Defense, we had a tremendous advantage by being perceived as a good and moral and decent people. Our freedom was something that reinforced our positive moral values, our ability to express ourselves freely, to worship freely. And all of these things are diminishing. Our freedom of speech, you can see in many places, if a Christian denies sodomy, they'll be denied promotions, they'll be denied jobs, they may be fired in many instances. In public schools, Christians are required to obey students who demand that they address them as members of the opposite sex. So, and this has happened here in Loudoun County, Virginia, where I live, and where I gave the speech that blew the roof off of the whole transgender movement and sent shockwaves around the United States, across the world. I did it with a one-minute speech. But basically, I went over after the fact that they were promoting racism and they were promoting sexual perversion by requiring teachers, public school teachers, to call boys girls and girls boys. And it is outrageous that this goes on, and it is undermining literally hundreds of years of good behavior in this country. We've always had deviant elements, don't get me wrong, but the government, the federal government, the state governments, the local governments in former generations, they always supported the good people against the bad, the law-abiding against the criminals. And today, the coin has flipped, and government now celebrate. We're required to celebrate some sort of a Pride Month. The entire month of June is devoted to celebrating a riot that occurred out in California at the Stonewall Bar, where a bunch of homosexual guys were all dancing and cavorting and getting ready to have their orgies and stuff, and the police cracked down on them and they rioted. And we're literally requiring children to celebrate Gay Pride Day. And what does that mean? I will guarantee you there's not a public school in the United States that does not have some little boys who have been brutally assaulted and raped by homosexual men. Not one. How do we explain to those children why they are being forced to celebrate this perverse behavior that inflicted such lasting damage on them and often destroys their entire life. I know because when I was a boy, I was a Florida snake hunter, and my buddy and I had one of these fellows pick us up, give us a ride. We were poor; we had to hitchhike, and he grabbed for my crotch when we were driving off, and by the time that we left, he and I had fought for a couple of minutes, and he finally decided he better give up. This wasn't going to work out. And when we left behind 3 or 4 big, heavy-bodied, venomous, cottonmouth water moccasin snakes slithering around on his floorboards. So it didn't work out too well for him. I'm sure next time he went to a gay bar, he probably said, when you go to pick up and rape little boys, you better not do it with Florida snake hunters. So I'm keenly attuned to these folks. I know what they do. I know what their practices are. But from our perspective, it's important to understand how deeply this embrace of sexual perversion, racial hatred, all the things being promoted by the Biden, the Obama, the Clinton administration, how they are undermining American standing across the globe. I hope it changes because it does have powerful consequences. Well, thank you for joining us today. I apologize for the fellow who called in and apparently tried to disrupt our show. But anyway, perhaps it was just an innocent mistake on his part. But in any event, thank you for being here. And this has been Dick Black, Senator Black, with Focus on the News. We will see you next Monday.